What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we're going to talk about something that I really wanted to talk about for a while. I've kind of been cooking it since, I think, May when I had Skullfest here, and then recently on the Zoom call on Patreon, we kind of hard-boiled it a bit as well and added some seasoning to it, and I think I've got it down. However, I will say every time I've tried to explain it, I have obviously had an issue getting my point across, so forgive me if it's not successful, but I have tried it on people. I've pitched this to people and it has worked this week. So hopefully that's a good indicator and a good sign. We're going to talk about ages, phases, and disposable income as it relates to collecting. This may not have a whole lot of pictures associated with it in slideshow and stuff because it's more of a conversation. It's a lot more kind of a cerebral thing, culture thing, a philosophy thing, which I actually enjoy a lot more in this format than a lot of just the straight toy talk. That being said, I do want to talk about a little housekeeping first, and that is the Scourge. Two things. A lot of people said it came with the Matrix. I can't vouch for that, but I'll take their word for it. I just didn't find it in my box that I was given. Hopefully I haven't lost it. That would be a bummer. Secondly, a lot of people complain about the deco. I get it. I honestly do. I honestly get when you're connected to something looking a certain way and then you get something and it doesn't look right to you. It's interesting, man, because I've been having this exact conversation on Nerd Rage as it relates to something else kind of entirely, but adjacent. And it is the exact scenario I'm kind of battling, which is funny. So there's you guys that see Scourge a certain way. He looks a certain way. He is a certain way, blah, 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 which I totally understand. You get this figure. It doesn't hit for you because it doesn't scratch those itches. Meanwhile, I'm a guy that doesn't know the character and I think the deco looks cool enough, so I'm kind of okay with it. And then maybe in the future, I would be upset if they changed it to what you like, because this is more so my introduction to it. I mean, I'm familiar with the character prior to this, but you know what I mean? It's more so my introduction to it, so it's really quite fascinating. Something to chew on. But yes, I get it. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this conversation. So where does a lot of this start for us? Well, a lot of this starts for most of us between the ages of 5 and 8. And there's actually psychological studies that show that oftentimes things lock into a young boy's psyche between the ages of 5 and 8. Obviously, there are females that are into Transformers and females that are into collecting and all that. That's not what I'm saying. I just had to say it for the Twitter crowd. But boys have a tendency to sort of lock into what they love between those ages. A lot of people that kind of grow up and become big sports enthusiasts start playing sports between the ages of 5 and 8. A lot of people that are still collecting got into a lot of these franchises between the ages of 5 and 8. So that's kind of when we sink our teeth in, by and large, and of course there's always anomalies. But what are we sort of up to, right? We're sort of up to the will of circumstance. Meaning, we're up to our parents, for one, budget, what they can afford to provide for us in that regard, because they don't owe us any of that, right? Food, shelter, clothing, love, nurturing. That's it. That's all your parents owe you. Anything else is a bonus. And I grew up a middle-class kid, but my family struggled financially for a good bit early on. My dad made sacrifices to his personal life to get me things that I wanted, so I never felt like I needed anything or wanted for anything, rather. But what are the other circumstances that can sort of surround that? Namely, hand-me-downs, right? Other neighbors in the community that have toys to come outside and play, and that's sort of how you sort of get indoctrinated into the toy game. And I think we are really, generationally, especially Generation X and on, we're in a very unique space historically where we sort of kept with those childish things. Because as we grew and matured, those childish things kind of grew and matured right along with us. So that's a psychological age and phase, right? You're a child, you lock into this, but in terms of like collecting, which you're not really doing, right? You're just hoarding toys that you like to play with. You're just a kid. You're sort of up to the luck of circumstance. And to be fair, it's not only what your parents can afford, but also how your parents prioritize that sort of thing for you. There's plenty of parents I know that have tons of money, but they don't buy their kids all sorts of toys and stuff because they don't think that it has any real value, and they'd rather invest in them having technological devices or learning tools, etc., which is fair. So it's not necessarily about income is what I'm saying. But ultimately, all of those things, unless you're kind of super fortunate, end up with a kid not having it all. And it was definitely the collect 'em all era. But you're pretty much left to the luck of the draw of what someone else is going to provide for you in that regard. So money is a concept and it's an ingredient to it, but it's not necessarily the most important because there's a ton of other factors that play in, because you're not really able to prioritize your own decisions at that point. Now, the time that most of us can start making money, and I can only speak for Maryland, is at the age of 14. I got my first job at the age of 15 working in a grocery store. I was supposed to be bagging groceries, but I ended up on the register, and I can tell you, at 15, I was not the guy you wanted for a job like that. Never stole anything in my life, but I just wasn't very good at it. Anyway, the irony of 15, and once again, I'm speaking in generalities. There's always exceptions to the rule and always people that kind of continued and stayed the course their entire lives. But the irony of that age in regard to collecting is that this is usually the age that a lot of people sort of take a break from all that stuff. They sort of take time to live a life, figure out who they are, experience life, and sort of start finding their stride and rhythm. And you're also not making a ton of money anyway. So I can tell you the priorities for me were girls, hanging out with friends, and whatever money you need for that, whether it's buying food or whatever, music, going to the movies, usually with girls, and clothes. You know, how I looked, namely, once again, to try to attract the girls, right? So that's sort of the next phase. Now, you do have a little bit of money, perhaps, and you can sort them on toys, but I think that's why a lot of the G1 crowd from my generation don't have a lot of the connection to, like, you know, a lot of the Transformers stuff that came out during that time, because during that time, we were chasing other things and living that part of our lives. So then there's sort of the after high school era in regard to ages, phases, and disposable income. And this is where you start getting a little bit more money, hopefully. Now, college is expensive, and a lot of us had to put money there. But this is also the time where you start to feel a little bit more comfortable and confident in who you are. Girls don't seem like such magical creatures that you have to chase them to the end of the earth. You can sort of take a more backseat approach, so to speak, gentlemen. And as a result, I can only speak for me, but I know a lot of people that have said the same thing. You start noticing some stuff back in those worlds, right? I remember noticing like the McFarlane toys, like the statuesque kind of ones, and the Capcom versus Marvel 2-pack figures, and, you know, Star Wars, the prequels were coming back out, so there was like a lot of stuff around that, so I just started taking notice again. So I think that that's a time where curiosity starts playing a part again. But you still don't quite have the disposable income, because you're in your early 20s, you're still figuring out, you're trying to line the ducks up and also not get yourself in serious trouble because you're in your early 20s and you're not playing with a full deck of cards yet. Which brings us to our later 20s, where a lot of people start settling down. Once again, not all people, and I'm speaking in generalities. Settling down usually requires cars, houses, weddings maybe, children. I had my first kid when I was 27. All of that stuff comes with financial responsibility that you're not necessarily used to. However, you're out of college, you're out of the military, you're out of trade school, or if you've just been in the workforce, hopefully you've been able to move up a good bit during that time. So now that curiosity can become a seed, and you can begin to plant that seed and water it a bit. This is when I started to experiment with some of like the DC collectible stuff. It also shows a little bit of growth in taste and maturity, right? Where like the 5 POA Star Wars figures and the 5 POA Capcom vs. Marvel figures, and they could have been 6 POA, but you know what I mean, didn't really appeal to me. They started to seem more like toys. But there was this other stuff. There were statues, there were kind of more advanced figures, more advanced sculpts, more advanced paint, and that's sort of right in line with your own personal maturity. You're also starting to settle, and hopefully, the grace of God and a little bit of hard work on your part, you got a little bit more money to put in the game now. Which brings me to what our big topic is. And I know this has been a lot of talk and so forth, but I'm playing a game here. I'm laying out a plan. Follow me. Your 30s is where a lot of people really start to solidify themselves. Usually your career choice is on the path it's going to be. Your family is usually locked down by at least your mid-30s. You sort of know what direction you're headed in. And that's not to say that you're playing with a full deck of cards yet, because even at 41, I can tell you I'm not sure if I am. But it does mean that you start to really get your feet underneath you. And the money gets better, more often than not. Not everybody's circumstance is different. And I know whenever you talk about money, it's a sensitive topic and people take offense and blah, blah, blah. I don't mean any offense. But for many people, by your 30s is when you really start to get a grip on life. And that's when I got back heavy into collecting. The disposable income is there, right? This is where we enter what I think I'm going to call the funnel. In your 30s, there's a wide end of the funnel that can collect a lot of different people into the large circular vacuum of death. And I say that jokingly. But a lot of people have a lot more disposable income in different ranges, but a lot more disposable income where they can start experimenting with a little bit higher end stuff. I know I did. In my 30s is where I got into Play Arts Kai. It's where I got into SH Figuarts, Transformers Masterpiece, third-party Transformers, etc., right? It's when you notice how good things can be. You notice things like sculpt, paint, build, articulation, what they mean, why they're good, why one is better than another, etc. You're finally able at this point to put some significant money behind something that you've always wanted to do, in many ways scratching that initial itch that started between the ages of, you guessed it, 5 to 8. And now you can start really building what I think a lot of us have always wanted, which is a collection. That collection can take different forms and mean different things to different people and sort of be displayed or utilized in different ways, but still a collection. But you're in your 30s. A lot of us are having kids, dealing with mortgages. A lot of us aren't completely happy with our financial situation. I know I can say that, but you got a little bit, not a ton. So the entry point becomes like 50 to 100 bucks is where the comfort becomes, right? PlayArts Kai, when I started collecting them, were up around 50 bucks. SH Figuarts was around 50 to 60 bucks. Transformers Masterpiece was between like 60 to 80 bucks, right in the pocket. That's a big entryway to that funnel. Now that funnel comes out and in my opinion ends in the 40s. But right around the time where it narrows, that's your late 30s. In regard to ages, phases, and disposable income, we got 3 different things going on. We got more money, usually. Your career choices, your job stuff, everything is sort of moving in the same direction. You understand the mortgage, you understand the insurance payments you're making, you understand you kind of got a grip on it all. But this is also where I think people take 2 different directions. And people either put this stuff in a lower priority space. Their children are getting older, their children are getting into sports sometimes. Like there's a lot of time that goes into investing into your kids as they get older. Not to say that it's not the same when they're babies, but it's different. You can't maybe put as much energy into this as you used to be able to. So I think people either put it in a lower priority or people move on to the next phase. And the next phase, for me, was hot toys and statues. Now we're talking about $250 to $500 purchases and a few that went well beyond, but those are extremely limited for me. But at the same time, you have to understand that these companies, they don't want to lose the funnel, right? They want to keep the open space of the funnel. They don't want it to get smaller, so to speak. So we see a lot of companies put a lot more materials, paint, engineering, sculpt work, accessories, etc. into their products. So as we get into our 40s, where does Masterpiece sit? Where does third-party Masterpiece sit? Where does Hot Toys sit? Where does PlayArts Kai sit? Where does SH Figuarts sit? And the truth is, all of them well over $100. PlayArts Kai, I think, got up to like $200 some at one point. And they might be there now, to be fair. SH Figuarts, usually around 100 bucks. Same with Mafex, Reveltech, 100 bucks. Used to be 50. Masterpiece, 200, 300 bucks sometimes. Fans Toys, same deal. Other third-party Masterpiece, 150, 200 bucks. So they're, I think, putting more time, energy, and effort to kind of keep that mass from taking a separate route where no longer do they value the money in the same way for the product that they were getting. So they're trying to raise the value of the product, which also raises the price point and makes it seem relatable. But where the funnel spits you out, in my opinion, is in your 40s. And I'm only kind of noticing this now because I'm just getting into my 40s. But I can tell you, a lot of people fall by the wayside by the time you get into your 40s. Why is this? It's for a number of reasons. For one, people branched off from the fork, right? They put the collection on a lower priority. Some have sold it off by now, a la Jisk, a la Tyler the Collector, and they've taken that money and invested it into their future, or into their children, or to upgrading like their living space, whatever the case may be, saving their marriage perhaps. What are the other reasons though? Well, some of us have like bought most of the things that we want. You know, we're talking about 5 to 10 years in your 30s of like grinding out and trying to get what you want. You don't want as much by the time you get in your 40s because you've either got it or you don't care anymore. And then there's the third component is that the price has become too high and now it doesn't seem as worth it through a 40-year-old lens. Whereas $50 to $100 sort of seemed like great in your 30s, now $500 to $1,000 doesn't seem as great in your 40s. But the funnel must remain, right? So you have to have stuff at that price point to recycle the people through them to get more consumers in, right? So you've got to have stuff in that $50 to $100 price point. And what do we have in there now? Third-party Legends and Hasbro Legacy stuff. And that's why that stuff has become so successful, in my opinion. And that's not to take away from them either. It's not to say that they're not good or anything else. I think they are, by and large. But the 30-year-old crowd is a bigger crowd, and that's the price point where they're more comfortable, I think, generally speaking, spending money. And a lot of us that are in the lower end of the funnel, there's just not as many of us out there right now. And the market is always going to cater to the majority. So I called this video Ages, Phases, and Disposable Income because that is what it's about. But I just thought it was a classier name than saying why Legends and Hasbro is kicking the Masterpiece games right now. I'll see you on Monday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.